OSI had replaced an anemic effort to investigate Nazi war criminals living in the United States that had previously been housed in the Immigration and Naturalization Service. The new legislation not only created OSI, but placed it in the criminal division of the Justice Department, provided it with a healthy budget, and supplied a legal framework under which Nazi criminals could be prosecuted for immigration fraud tied to their having misrepresented their backgrounds and their participation in Nazi persecution. Initially, the office was organized like other federal prosecution efforts. Under the direction of prosecutors, trained criminal investigators conducted the investigations, locating documentary evidence and witnesses. It soon became evident, however, that these cases were of a different sort. The crimes being investigated had been committed an ocean away, the evidence was in different languages, and the historical context into which the evidence needed to be placed was nearly lost to all but those who had lived it and the historians who studied it. To investigate these crimes with the necessary sophistication, the prosecution team needed new members. I joined a small cadre of history graduate students and new PhDs, who, although initially hired to translate documents, soon effectively replaced the criminal investigators in the office. We developed over time a new discipline that might be called forensic history. For the first time, professional historians were hired as full-time members of a legal team, using their knowledge and skills to assist in legal proceedings. Our importance to OSI's mission was reflected in changes to the organizational chart. I started at OSI in March 1980 as the third historian, joining a staff that included 10 or 11 investigators who had been detailed from various federal law enforcement agencies. By the time I left, 9 years later, there were 10 historians and only 1 investigator. We worked as historians work, mining archives for evidence, interviewing individuals for elusive details, and consulting experts for context and continuity. But we were also advocates, and we labored under some constraints. The federal rules of evidence imposed new limitations on what we could offer as proof, and we memorized, like first-year law students, the exceptions to the hearsay rule. Our standard fare at OSI were cases against low-level, non-German auxiliaries who, in the service of their masters, had been involved in the persecution of innocent victims. The Germans had relied heavily on locals to assist them, as translators, policemen, and camp guards, in their occupation of conquered lands. And the indigenous population had had a powerful motive to link their stars to the German conquerors. As the tide of the war shifted against the Germans, forcing them to retreat, their helpmates followed, knowing that a return home would mean Soviet justice. They melted into the vast sea of displaced persons who flooded into German territory with no other place to go. Side by side with their victims, these victimizers benefited from Allied aid and found passage to a brighter future in America on the same ships that carried those they had helped to harm. Once in America, they left their pasts behind and established new lives. It took 4 decades and the effective pressure of a dedicated few to draw attention to the grotesque irony that the United States had become a haven not only for victims of Nazi persecution, but also for those who had helped persecute them. In March 1983, William French Smith, President Ronald Reagan's first Attorney General, broadened OSI's purview by assigning us to investigate charges that American intelligence had recruited former Gestapo officer Klaus Barbie after the war. The allegation was particularly alarming, since Barbie, who had been stationed in France, had been involved in the arrest and deportation of Jews, and had been tried and sentenced to death in absentia by the French. Alan A. Ryan, Jr., OSI's director at the time, issued a comprehensive report that chronicled how the United States had recruited Barbie as an intelligence asset, knowingly shielded him from French prosecution, and spirited him out of Europe to South America, employing the so-called Rat Line, an overland escape route to Italian seaports. Ryan made headlines when he recommended to the Attorney General that the U.S. government offer the French an apology for having delayed justice. After the Barbie investigation, a far more notorious figure emerged to capture the interest of the public: Josef Mengele. Mengele's twin personae, embodiment of both the Holocaust and the failure of justice, played a role in the political and moral calculus of the 3 nations that set out to find him in 1985. For the most outspoken of the Americans,